to talk about AI Sales OS. And as I said, the reason we're pursuing this is that the reality of the market right now is that a lot of go-to-market organizations are spending an inordinate amount of time on non-selling activities. Chances are anywhere between excellent and perfect that you have seen this statistic before. I think it's the chief pain that's driving interest in what we do. Certainly all forms of sales leadership are leaning very heavily on this statistic to look for justifications to go out and pursue better ways of doing things in the sales orgs of the day. And ideally, we want to get to a situation where these numbers are flipped, right? I don't have a good sense, candidly, of what the percentages will look like in the future state, but I do know that having high-paid reps, high OTE employees in general, doing a lot of admin, doing sort of mini updates, and that kind of thing is really not a sustainable state of affairs. Anecdotally, for my days as a rep, I'm still in a couple of group chats that are nicknamed things like "Have you updated Salesforce?" or "Hey guys, just checking in." And that's alluding to RDs that are constantly sort of peppering the AEs, frontline AEs, to do their updates, right? So we want to flip these around. We want the future state to look something closer to this. So before we even get to anything downstream from this, I want to share a rather convoluted but hopefully illuminating diagram to sort of explain why an OS is needed versus just a one-time activity or action. When you think about bringing a product to market, there's the first thing you have to do is to sort of understand what pain you're solving, and that helps you shape the addressable market for what it is you're bringing to the table. So for this example, for demonstration purposes today, I've created a fictional company that sells a modified VPN type tool. Essentially, the concept is that it's a lightweight agent that serves the purpose of antivirus, anti-malware, and VPN all rolled into one. Okay, so given the nature of that product, this is the universe that we are looking at serving. Now, of course, the best way to fail as a company is to try to be all things to all people. So we need to find discipline quickly and decide within this addressable market, where do we want to play? So let's pick a focus area. For argument's sake, let's say we're going to ignore business to customer. We're going to be B2B only. We're also going to ignore slow-moving sectors like the government, let's say. So we've chosen our focus area for our product. Now, when you build a sales organization, on the RevOps side of things, you'll go about the exercise of designing the territories and deciding how to split up the various jobs to be done. So within your area of sales focus, you'll typically split this out either vertically or by geographies. For argument's sake, let's just say this fictional product is being brought to market, and we've elected to split the totality of our territory into 4. Logically, this is what that separation looks like. But of course, it requires a different skill set and a different kind of effort to land something like this in a major enterprise versus perhaps a medium-sized enterprise, a small business, all the way down to a mom and pop. So once again, we have to stratify the geographies here by the different kinds of accounts. So if we keep a very simplistic view of the world, of the go-to-market world here, if, for argument's sake, we have only one rep, one majors rep in Geo1, one majors rep in Geo2, and so on, we're looking at having 16 people that are bringing this product to market and are responsible for all the downstream actions that you're going to see in AI Sales OS. There's a lot of utility and interesting stuff to be shown, but it's really important that we understand that these lines that we've drawn here, these logical lines, are not static. And given that the majority of you do serve in a go-to-market function, I think you'll appreciate that as the market moves, as conversations are had, as feedback comes back to the mothership, this logical diagram very quickly morphs into something that perhaps looks like this. The realization may be that, you know what, to sell into these major accounts, reps can really only have 2 or 3 accounts. So the balance of their, say, 25 accounts needs to be dropped down to the enterprise tier. Perhaps you want to sort of mix and match geographies. I've worked in a number of early stage companies that have pulled Canada into the US Northeast and spun it back out. So these things happen. These things oscillate over time. Perhaps a more dramatic shift happens, right? If we're selling in this case, a fictional VPN / security and networking tool, if we decide that we need to change our messaging and fundamentally shift our area of focus, that rectangle that you see in the top left actually morphs down into the middle. So every time a line is drawn in this logical diagram or a line moves, that requires everything that you're about to see today to happen all over again for each cell in this diagram. So if I am a majors rep in GO1, upon that move, I need to reassess every account that is now in my territory. I need to stack rank each of those accounts. I need to really go through the exercise of understanding where best to spend my time, because just about 50% of all cliches in the sales world revolve around using the word time. Time kills all deals, that kind of thing. So it's really important that we have a system that is repeatable at high speed to allow us to calibrate and attack the market as needed. Final modification to this diagram, then we'll jump into one or two final slides before showing you some of the tech. Here, we're still in a very simplistic distribution of sales territories. We have 5 kinds of reps, 4 geographies, so that's 20 people. By the time you're sort of a high growth organization, you'll probably have a distribution that looks like this, where you have more than one kind of each rep in each geo. So the cumulative effect of this level of complexity in your sales org means that there will be a huge amount of rework that has to happen. And that rework is one of the chief offenders of stealing reps time, right? At the beginning of each quarter, why is it that I have to manually go in, reinterrogate all of my accounts, see what's in the news, to see if what I'm bringing to the table is actually going to be useful? That is something that can and should be automated. And that's one of the very first skills that we're going to show you that is packaged up into AI Sales OS. Just to sort of put a bow on it, if I'm a rep and I own one of those smaller squares that you saw in that previous diagram, as I said, every time a major shift in positioning happens, or a territory line is redrawn, or any kind of other organizational boundary is moved, I have to reevaluate each of my accounts for goodness of fit. I need to then rank those accounts. Within the ranked accounts, I need to then piecewise determine who my ideal prospects are in each of those accounts against my current prospecting rubric. That's really important, because if we are deciding, again, going back to my VPN replacement fictional product here, if we're deciding to spin this as a connectivity tool rather than a security tool, the prospecting rubric changes in terms of the titles that I'm going after. Then, once I've decided what my prospect list looks like, I have to then actually go about the real quote-unquote sales activity of enriching my prospect information, finding out, how long have they been at company X, what is their background, what is their contact information, so that I can actually make outreach to them, and ideally strike up a conversation and potentially surface an opportunity and manage that to closure. Last slide, and we'll jump into a little bit of a demo in the environment here. Within the confines of AI Sales OS, these are some of the greatest hits in terms of workflows that we see being pervasively useful. You'll notice that a couple of these have been singled out and put into orange. The reason for that is these are things that I've built that have not quite been folded into AI Sales OS yet, but will be in the coming days. Let's talk a little bit about each. So this idea of a champion chaser is not new. I was speaking to an existing customer, and their request was, hey, Yash, we've determined that one of our best sources of leads is past champions that have moved on to different organizations. Can you help us with that? Now, of course, there's a bit of a cottage industry of products that already offers that kind of capability, whereby you mark certain users, or certain customers rather, as being champions, and then when there are significant career changes reflected on the internet about that user, that a notification is sent out. As it turns out, that's a very simple thing to do. So I've built a workflow in Copy.ai that essentially listens for changes in career developments against a list of champions, so that if I have John, who I sold something to a company A, who has moved on to company B, I'm given a quick message with a pre-drafted email to congratulate John, and to say, hey, once you've got over your first 90 days, let's have a chat about rinsing and repeating the success you had at company A. Just a very sort of trivialized example, but I think it speaks to the power of what you can do with workflows rather than just relying on pure brute force, as many sales organizations do. The second thing I want to call out here is the coaching for all in the bottom right. We've named one of our workflows Meeting Insights. And what Meeting Insights does is it listens to the transcripts of sales calls and determines what needs to happen next. So, if I am on a call with John once again, and between us, we agree that the next step is to meet on such and such a date, and we're each going to bring additional people to the meeting, we can capture all those insights, and that's completely fine. But there's a level of coaching that exists within that workflow that I think most sales organizations are missing. What I mean by that is the way most sales orgs are architected. If I'm a rep, typically what will happen is I'll have some kind of deal inspection meeting with my manager, weekly, bi-weekly, what have you. And in that meeting, I'll be challenged on, just because John was a champion at company A, how can you be sure he's a champion at company B? Really just, having a bit of a reality check passed down to me. So the idea in this workflow is that we can interrogate the transcripts of these calls to provide in-step coaching to reps, to regional director types, as well as to the very senior leadership to make sure that the sales process is being followed as prescribed, right? We see this a lot where reps are eager to bring revenue, so they'll try to skip steps in the sales process. And what invariably happens is come the time to actually sign something, there's some reluctance, and we have to skip all the way back to, for example, a POC phase. So we can track adherence to the sales process, adherence to best practices as dictated by the organization and various levels of leadership, as well as just self-reflection for the reps. Do I have happy ears? Am I being overly optimistic about this opportunity as it sits in front of me? Okay, so that was a lot of talking on my part, but I think it's really important to set the stage for what you're about to see. Before I cut over, are there any questions, Eve, that have popped up between then and now? Sounds like a no. Okay. One sec here. So let me get my bearings. Okay, so what you're looking at right now is Copy.ai. And one of the things I think it's really important to point out is that we're not trying to be the star of the show. In fact, we're sort of the antithesis of that. We want to melt into the background, pick up a lot of the heavy lifting that needs to happen, and just go point to point from your incumbent systems, your incumbent problem areas to elevate the overall go-to-market team's quality of life. So if we think about how that works, if we revisit my talk track from a second ago, let's just say it's day one of the quarter. I'm a rep. Territories have been shuffled, and I have been handed, lucky me, United Airlines, right? My sense is that a lot of what's happened to date and what's been documented in the CRM is probably not that great. So what I can do as an individual contributor is to come into my CRM environment and hit a button to refresh the account profile, in this case for United Airlines. So this can be upon creation, upon modification, upon rep change, and so on. So the second that happens, everything that you see here in this description is populated live based on a series of parameters that are requested in the workflow. So our workflow over here, let me just jump into it, is going to go out and generate an account profile. So you'll see that these map one-to-one, right? Based on the company we're targeting, we're going to go scrape the website. We're going to make a determination as to how the company likes to project itself, right? What are its sort of primary customers? In this case, it's a bit convoluted in the sense that there's a business traveler population, there's a family and friends, visiting family and friends type of population. So all this information is brought back through the lens of my fictional VPN company. I need to understand how many people work at this company and in which function. That is to say, which of them have computers that require a VPN versus being perhaps frontline staff that don't use a computer. These are all pieces of research that are required so that I can very accurately understand ahead of time, before a single phone call, before a single email, where I should be spending my time and how to position when I do that. Within this, the system is going to determine what my ideal customer profile should look like within the confines of this company. How does this company that I'm target think about pricing its offering? And then I want to make sure that I'm showing a lot of, for lack of a better word, mercy towards my sales force. I want to make sure, especially when you're prospecting to the airline business, it is littered with initialisms, acronyms, and specialist terms. It's really important that as a go-to-market professional, you are prepared when you show up to the call. You're not put off when somebody throws an initialism at you that you've never heard before. For example, in aviation, they use the initialism PDEW, passengers daily each way, as a key metric, right? You cannot expect everybody in your org to know that, but you want the AI in this case to make that determination as to what is relevant and to bubble it back to you and ultimately serve it up in your CRM environment, or perhaps right ahead of a call to surface it in Slack, as an example. I see we have a question, so let me just deviate for 1 second here. James has asked, what level of configuration is needed on the user side to use these workflows, or are these plug and play? Good question. So these are plug and play, James, but they are designed to be modified, right? The reality is, for different sectors and different kinds of prospect companies, there are going to be different things that you want to listen for. So as an example, perhaps in this case, the pricing aspect is kind of superfluous, right? How United prices tickets is probably irrelevant to somebody that's selling VPN software. So I could go ahead and just blow this away. Or perhaps I could replace this with some estimates of which technologies are they using and can we infer their spend, right? There are definitely ways to do that. So that is customizable. So it's both. It is plug and play, but improvable. There's a further question here from Blake. What checks and balances can you put in to make sure that the data is accurate? Yeah, that's an important question. So I would say a few things. We've taken great pains to make sure that the workflows that have been packaged up into AI Sales OS have been battle tested, such that the majority of what you get back should be very reliable. There are a couple of other things that you can do to make sure that you feel comfortable with this number. So when it comes to information that's volunteered, as an example, if we look at the number of employees, we can see here that we very clearly provided a citation as to where that number came from, so that if you are suspicious about a number, or you want to sort of verify it for yourself with your own eyes, you have the ability to say, okay, let me go dig up the annual report, or wherever it is this came from. So citations are part and parcel. You can be a lot more explicit with it and have those laid out somewhere, but generally we find just appending them with an asterisk is sufficient in most cases. Where was I? Yep. So building a lingo map. So we've built a lingo map, and now, obviously, as I said, we don't want to be the star of the show. We've compiled this huge report with all this information. What we then do is run a subsequent workflow. In this example, we are going to be writing everything back into Salesforce. So here, just a simple configuration, we've popped it back into this description field right here. Right. So the thinking is, not only are you getting these high-level pieces of information that are broadly useful when prospecting, you want to make sure that you're looking at things that are relevant today as well. So that's why it's really important to be able to run this at will, based on significant changes to your territory planning, to market events, economic events, and so on. So we're still very, very high in the funnel. We've talked a little bit about what the broad rubric of prospecting looks like, and sort of account research. What we really want to do at this point is to go a level deeper, right? So there's two schools of thought here. I think for some people, they like to get out and about, start making contact, and when some level of opportunity has been surfaced, battle test the viability of that opportunity against things that are reported in a company's 10Q, 10K, and that kind of thing. Personally, I prefer to look at that information up front because I find, certainly in my experience, it's been that the people that are most willing and able to champion change in organizations are ones that align themselves closely with the financial markers of that organization. So we've built a workflow that helps you do that as well. So let me jump to it here real quick. I believe it is in Insights here. So what we've done is we've created a workflow that analyzes earnings calls. And essentially what this has done, you'll see here, I've popped in the stock ticker for United Airlines, and I've popped in a description for my fictional company here, middleman.io, a super lightweight endpoint agent that replaces antivirus, anti-malware, VPN, and data loss tools rolled into one. So what this is going to do is go read the latest earnings call transcript for United Airlines. It's going to bring back the things that are top of mind to the executive leadership. And based on that, it's going to ideate as to where my offering, in this case, fictional offering, could be useful to the airline. So even though I haven't used the word cybersecurity, even though I haven't talked about anything in that bent, I've really just described the tool. You'll see here in the output that it's given me a few ideas as to where and how I can prospect, right? So enhancing operational efficiency at airports like Newark. So it's gone out, done the research, figured out that Newark is a hub, and it's given me some pretty reasonable ideas, I would say, as to how I can position the importance of elevating endpoint security to the various powers that be at the airline. It's stressing here that given the grounding of a specific kind of aircraft, they're under a lot more pressure to drive yield. So IT failures are more important than ever. So that's a point of conversation as well. So you'll see that these are, I would say, fairly advanced ideas, and not something that you'd expect perhaps a junior rep to be able to surmise for themselves. So you're getting quite a lot more utility and a much elevated level of insight than you would if you just let the team be and to their own devices. I see we've got a couple of other questions here, so let me just take a quick pause here. So how do you evaluate intent data? So we don't have what I would characterize as a sort of direct intent signal. There are companies that provide things like summaries of visitors to your website from company X, or any number of other harvest signals. Generally, what our approach to that has been is to evaluate the news and press releases and things like that to understand what priorities are, to think about them in the abstract, and then to pipe in data from your CRM that you may have bought from a third party that signals some of that to help you make that determination for rank, right? In terms of how we would do that here, if we just look at this really quickly, we have a lead enrichment layer here. Oh, sorry, I should be in lead scoring. And what we're doing here is making a determination as to how we classify who fits into what bucket. So in this case, if you had bought some kind of intent data from a vendor, we would read whatever that value is and use that as an ancillary data point to decide who falls into tier 1 versus tier 2, tier 3, and so on. So I hope that answers your question for both Martha and Heidi. If not, please feel free to shoot me an email, yash@copy.ai, and I'll be happy to elaborate on that a little bit. Further question from Martha. What's the percentage increase of data you're pumping into Salesforce, and does it typically increase the spend? I'm not totally certain I understand the question. What I will say is that there's very little penalty for integration reads and writes in and out of the system. So in terms of the spend with us, it doesn't really materially change anything, depending on how your CRM is licensed. If it's volume based in terms of reads and writes, it potentially could, but it hasn't been my experience that anyone has seen a surge in their sort of CRM costs as a function of how we read and write into HubSpot or Salesforce. Okay, so we've built out our territory. I found my top target, in this case, in United Airlines. The next thing I have to do, because people sell to people, not to companies, I need to go ahead and do a little bit of prospecting. So in the old world, what happens, right? You hop on LinkedIn or ZoomInfo or something like that. you start to build a very sort of ugly query about the type of person you're looking for, a prospecting rubric typically, right? Title contains director or VP or X, but not executive assistant to. Title includes the word security and networking or networking. So it becomes a bit of a jumble of parameters that you're juggling. We wanted to make it a lot more simple than that. It just didn't seem like a sensible thing to do to force people to spend time getting comfortable with that. So in this case, you'll see this workflow was called up by the workflow upstream when I populated United into the CRM. It's passed it down into this workflow, and it's determined that I'm looking for security and network leaders, and I'm looking for 2 leads, right? This could be 200, 2,000, doesn't really matter. I just kept it small for the purposes of demonstration. So what this is going to do is, using the offering that I have, the description of my offering, excuse me, it's going to determine, okay, what is the goodness of fit of the people that I'm prospecting, and how do I actually find these people? So this workflow is going to go out, search for contacts, bring back their LinkedIn information, their phone numbers, their emails, and various other particulars. One of the things that I really like about this workflow is that you can expand it pretty easily. So as an example, if this fictional company middleman.io has an arch rival, let's call it, not middleman.io, and there's somebody at United that is constantly doing podcasts or PR hits for that company, we can listen for that, and we can know not to waste our time with that person, because the chances of them coming around after they've spent X amount of time extolling the virtues of this other company are probably quite low. So we can really do intelligent things like that upstream to minimize wasted time. So what this list is going to do, and I'm not going to scroll all the way to the bottom because I don't want to reveal any contact information, but it's going to bring back 2 users and their contact information. And then it's going to kick off the subsequent step in the workflow here, which is to generate prospecting messaging. So what we're going to do, given that prospect's LinkedIn information in this example, we're going to scrape it, get their first name, generate a pithy subject line, and a bit of a cold email. So we found one of these people. Again, I don't want to spend too much time because I don't want to dwell on his information specifically, but you'll see that my messaging has trickled through, lightweight endpoint security, and a short email has been written to prospect to Rob, right? And as you'll see, it I think fits the bill for an initial opening salvo. I don't want to get too caught up in the style of this writing because everybody has their own style. We are not prescribing that you have to write it this way. Generally, what we advocate is that when you're customizing this workflow to yourself, and this sort of dovetails into the earlier conversation or our earlier question, what we would do is, to say, write a prospecting email, and at the bottom of this background prompt, put in a comment that says, here is a sample, or here are some samples of what good looks like. So what will happen is the output will morph into the writing style of the rep on whose behalf that text is being created. 2 ancillary things I just want to throw out here, then I'm going to take a pause to answer some questions because I see a few have come in. This is a really good opportunity to figure out who your best writers are, and to have their writing style, their prospecting style applied across the board to your entire org. And here's a little bit of a tidbit. Your top performing sales rep is seldom your top writer, right? Think about that for a second. Broadly speaking, whoever is generating the most revenue, that's typically a function of conversations and familiarity that they have with large accounts. Account growth and sort of post-sale growth tends to drive that top performer. So you typically want to be looking at your maybe 2nd, 3rd, 4th rep to understand who's really good at prospecting and to apply their writing style to everybody, perhaps as the baseline. Let me just take a quick pause because there's a lot of questions here. So James asks, what are the advantages of using Sales OS versus the AI being integrated by the CRM vendors into their platforms? Yeah, that's again an important question. I think if you look at the approach that a lot of software vendors are taking to staying relevant in the AI age, What they're doing is they're bolting on various AI capabilities into parts of the platform. Now, if we look at, for example, this account enrichment workflow that we started with, what's happening here is that we're looking at pieces of data that come from within the enterprise, perhaps from within the CRM, as well as things that are out and about on the open internet, or perhaps signals that are coming from a third-party provider. So I think the exhaustiveness of the coverage that you can get with something that's purpose-built like this is far superior. I say this with no sort of without trying to sort of diminish what a lot of other vendors are doing, but generally speaking, I would say that their thinking is constrained by what is in their box. That's not to pick on CRM vendors specifically. If you look at the various call recording technologies and things that are out there, they kind of do the same thing. They over-index on just the piece of information that they have access to without offering you the ability to have a blank sheet of paper and just describe very exhaustively in painful detail the universe that you want to see. So I think that the customizability, the flexibility, and the overall trainability are nowhere near what we afford versus what comes out of the box with any number of pieces of software that are out there. What if you are heavily invested in Zoom Info and their intent data? Do you have an integration with Zoom Info? So I'd say a couple of things to that. If you're very reliant on Zoom Info and their intent scores, nothing wrong with that. We do, as I said, have an enrichment layer that sort of waterfalls through 20 different vendors to get various pieces of information back. If you're using Zoom Info, you find it reliable, there's no reason we can't either directly through API go and get signals from there to factor into workflows, or perhaps more elegantly, you'd want some of those signals to be populated into your CRM, from where we would grab those intent signals, so that you have a very sort of crisp and clear system of record that has all of the information in a single place, right? We don't want you to be getting into a sort of spaghetti architecture. I think it makes sense to keep the core systems. Let's see here. How do you follow up to that first email? If I've understood the question, I think is the question around how do I triage a response if I get one, or is it do I need to write more emails? My suspicion is that it's the latter. So if we look at what prospecting looks like writ large, here where I'm generating my messaging here, I've just elected to create one single message, right? Anyone who's been in sales for longer than 5 minutes knows that it takes a good amount of time for messages to finally land. So you probably need to have a 10 or 15 email sequence, perhaps with a custom LinkedIn connection request message baked into the middle. So to do that, you're essentially just duplicating the step and creating as many of these as you feel are necessary to establish a drip to message into your targets. Our prescribed approach to doing this, as my last comment probably will have hinted, is to then populate these messages back into your CRM so that they can then be picked up by SalesLoft or Outreach or one of these kinds of tools for onward dispatch. That way you have all of this containerized and held for posterity in a single environment, so that you can then interrogate that data to understand when things stop working, so that you can come back out here and make modifications to the workflows. From an integration standpoint, I should point out that we have first-party integration into Microsoft Teams, Slack, HubSpot, Salesforce, and a few other things. Based on market demand, we're receptive to doing other things. But what we found is that in most sales orgs, there's a good amount of flexibility and a good amount of appetite to use intermediary tools like Zapier to facilitate things till people feel comfortable that the juice is worth the squeeze to go to IT and say, hey, we need to integrate this. So give us credentials. But we can certainly talk more about that in the community, and I would encourage you to put your questions and requests into the community for that. William, workflow library seems extensive from review and trialing solution. Is there a Copy.ai favorite subset of the library for early stage new business? Yeah, so I'll have to think about that. I mean, for me, the two workflows that I think are absolutely non-negotiable are number one, stack ranking your accounts, right? let me build my account profiles and decide which ones to attack first. And then the meeting intelligence. So meeting intelligence, which is where we're getting to right now. Let's say, we've gone through this motion. I've created my account plan. I've prospected into United. This gentleman, Rob, has responded. We've had a call. That's great. Now what? Well, when we're on the call, there's a lot of intelligence that can be derived from an individual sales call. One of the reasons in my slide over here that we showed a second ago that I chose to highlight coaching for all is that I think a lot of people in the go-to-market population stand to benefit from having just-in-time coaching delivered to them. So what does that look like? If I hop into meeting insights for a second, you'll see that we have this workflow that listens to the transcript of a call to understand what happened, right? Let's have a broad summary. Was it an initial call, a discovery call? Was it an information security call? What exact use cases were discussed? What importance and strength were given to each of those use cases by the client? This way, I can, as a practitioner, as a sales practitioner, say, listen, they brought up 5 use cases, but only 2 of them seem really interesting. Let's completely park those bottom 3 for now, just to maintain strength of signal as we're messaging out to the market. What competitors were mentioned, right? Perhaps they mentioned a company I've never heard of. It's incumbent upon me, the rep, to say, okay, I need to go away between now and the next time I speak to Rob to figure out what is this company and what is the sort of A versus B comparison, us versus them, so that I'm able to intelligently articulate our differentiators. What important people were mentioned? This includes people that were not on the call, right? When we think about the sales methodologies of the day, things like MEDDIC, it's really important that you identify who your economic buyer is. A lot of the time in sales calls, people will intimate that. Matt may say, hey, I meet with James every Tuesday, I'll run this by him. So based on the language, based on our ability to go look James up, we can determine that he is probably the economic buyer. So if you're living in the MEDDIC world, we can populate that back into Salesforce to say, hey, James X is the economic buyer. Right, so lots and lots of intelligence to be had in that sense. This is just at the individual rep level. If you go up a level, let's just say you have a regional director that has 6 reps under them, you can do a macro analysis, perhaps 1 call of each of the reps that rolls up into that person a week and determine, hey, regional director, nobody on your team is using use cases. You should encourage them to use these case studies rather. You should encourage them to use the case studies that marketing has worked so hard to build. Here's the location, right? Perhaps you've just come back from sales kickoff and you've decided we're going to change our sales process to include an additional step, 1 level above mid-level leadership and go-to-market. That person is probably really interested in understanding if people are even following the new workflow. So these are all things that can be determined just by investigating and inspecting call transcripts. So all of this gets written back once again into Salesforce so that you have a rich, up-to-date corpus of information to determine what is and isn't working, which reps need help, which RDs need help, and what sort of adherence there is to the current process. Not to belabor the point, but one thing that I will point out, and I've been in various sales functions for a while, you would be hard-pressed to find a sales team that does not have at least 1 or 2 collegiate athletes in it. And the simple reason sales leaders like to hire those people is that they exhibit, an unreasonable amount of dedication. That's obviously what it takes to play elite collegiate sports. They are people that understand that quote-unquote greatness is made in practice, not on game day. So they're going to do the work outside of the sales calls. And the biggest part of it, ostensibly, is that they're open to coaching. But the problem is, given how busy sales organizations are, a lot of that coaching just doesn't happen. So if you have a workflow that is providing that in-step coaching, I think it's a really, really valuable tool to help your reps grow and ultimately, overperform, which is what everybody is looking for. Let me take a little bit of a pause here because I see a few more questions. Yeah. So would this work in an untraditional environment? If I'm phrasing that correctly, or if I'm paraphrasing that correctly, I would say that any sales motion that requires a good amount of research or a good amount of scale is a good fit here, right? It's not the case that everybody lives on LinkedIn and that is the only populace that we can target. But I think if you're thinking about much sort of niche or sales motions, there may be some challenges around that. I think the example that was given in the chat was, hair salon owners. I think that may be a bridge too far, but perhaps if you're one level up from that, if you're a distributor selling into hair salons, there's probably a case for using this in the way that we've described. There was a question around the large language models that we're using. So if I just jump into here really quickly, one of the real strengths of the platform is that we are language agnostic. So as you can see in my environment here, we already have Claude 3, Opus, and Sonnet in beta available to internal users. Those large language models only dropped this week, I think on Monday. So we're very quick about making sure the latest and greatest are accessible to you. Again, those are not public yet, but they will be shortly. The idea here is that we're going to help you make an adjudication as to which language model should be used for which task. Not every large language model is good at everything that is asked of it, so we'll make that determination for you. Perhaps if you're looking to scrape a competitor's website and look for specific pieces of information, something like Claude 1 is cheap and cheerful and really good at that kind of task. If you're looking to brainstorm something that's quite advanced and requires a large corpus of context, you'd want to use something like GPT-4 Turbo. So we make that available to you. I'd say the ancillary benefit of this as well is that if there are disruptions to a given large language model, we can fail over to the next one just to say, hey, until that gets resolved, let's run this against a different model. So that gives you a level of robustness and resilience that is not available in products that are reliant on a single flavor of underlying large language model. Can you create a workflow with multiple steps in one workflow? If I've understood the question, I would say two things, right? You can, as you can see, have multiple steps in a workflow. If you want, you can, off the side of a given workflow, do a run-in line, which allows you to fork out the workflow and bring something back in. You can also run a workflow in such a workflow action, rather, in a manner in which it has several outputs, which then are iterated over with elements downstream. So between those two accommodations, as well as the fact that each workflow can call another workflow, I think you should be in good shape, Blake. What else do we have here? Sorry, lots of questions, but I just want to make sure that we don't leave anybody hanging here. When you write back into MEDPIC fields in SFC, will it analyze all to provide complete values? It'll analyze anything and everything you tell it to, right? If it's just the context of the last call, we can restrict it to that. If it is the last call plus ancillary pieces of information that you directed at, that's also no problem. So we'll take those pieces of information, we'll distill it down into the individual components of MEDPIC, and either write it back as one large blob of prose, or do it on a field-wise basis if you have it broken out that way in Salesforce. What skill sets are needed to design and customize workflows in Sales OS? I don't know if it's much of a skill set, to be honest. I think it's really just a little bit of curiosity and a willingness to engage in some of the materials that we've made available to get you trained up. Something like this, is not very difficult to stand up. I think it looks a little bit more intimidating than it is because there's quite a few steps. But if you hop into the environment, and if you haven't created an account in Copy.ai, I encourage you to do that. You can go to the workflows area here, click plus, and try something. Maybe as a sort of very vanilla first kick at the can, you could try something like, given a block of text, translate the text into German, and then summarize it into 3 bullets, right? That'll give you an indication of how your instruction will be interpreted and how you can think about what it looks like to prompt the system in an effective way. I will take this opportunity to throw a compliment to our prompt engineering team. They have done a very, very nice job of making it easy to pass something over the fence and receive a reasonable, high quality understanding and output back. That's not always the case. I think if you've kicked the tires on a number of the large language models, direct chat applications, you'll see that they can be quite stubborn about certain things. So we've made accommodations to make sure that that is not the case. I assume we can pull data from different Salesforce objects, i.e. campaign, lead, contacted. Correct, yes. The only limitation, Blake, is what privileges does the account that you're using to access that information have? That's really it. There's possibly one other limitation in the sense that if you have complicated relationships between various objects, the way Salesforce is architected, they don't necessarily expose all of those relationships externally so that there aren't accidental calls for data that have an accidental Cartesian product, an inadvertent many-to-many join. But that's more of a Salesforce limitation. That's really not on our side. But happy to step you through that offline if there are specific questions you have. Is what you are sharing with us included in licenses, memberships now? Yes. So everything that you see here, all these workflows or some variant of them exist in the workflow library. So you can come in here, just sort of kick the tires on one or two of these things and decide, what looks interesting. So if I jump into the world of marketing for a second, let's just say I want to, write a bunch of LinkedIn posts. I can come in here, click this, single click, bring it into my environment, determine which of the writing format styles I want to adopt, and delete the rest, and you're off to the races. So yes, these are included. And I will point out that the library itself is growing, right? As we develop a better understanding of the biggest pains that people are feeling, we're codifying resolutions to those in the form of workflows and populating them back into the environment that you see here. How is the pricing available in Copy.ai applicable to Sales OS? That's a good question. So the single predicate for our pricing is credits, and credits are a function of how much text you flow through the system. So if you ask a very simple sort of yes or no question, and that does not require a bunch of heavy research in the form of, say, reading lots and lots of information, that'll be probably a credit or less. If you are doing something a lot greedier, let's say we jump into the analyze the latest earnings call workflow that we ran here, this costs 22 credits, right? So the sole predicate is credit consumption. That's one of the reasons we make these workflows available, because we only derive value if you're deriving value, and that comes from having useful workflows accessible to our entire user population. Oh, that's a good call out from Eve. The reason this is an actual charge is because I'm in the run state here. If you were to do this upstream, just in the build environment here, as you can see, testing does not cost any credits. So we want to make sure that you slow down to speed up, right? You want to make sure that you take the time up front to define your systems, define your workflow, and then sort of put the jet back on and let this happen. So going back to my example of the VPN sales guy, let's just say I have my 100 accounts, I have 20 targets in each account, and I have 20 messages that I want to send to each. That becomes something that can be kicked off with a single item creation in Salesforce, which then propagates all the way down. And if you look at how that manifests at the lower levels of this, if I'm looking at the prospect email generation, which is down here, you essentially have a large table of these that have been run over time, right? You have all of these that are flown through the system, each racking up a couple of credits each in this particular example. One thing that I have really not talked about at all is really these two views that we see here. So one, this is the tabular view where you as a user can elect to bring in cuts of data. Let's just say you have 100 targets and you want to run them through this without involving your IT team and your Salesforce team just yet. You can absolutely do that. Come in here, import them, run them through. If you're feeling a little bit ambitious and curious to kick the tires on using the API, we have comprehensive samples on how to do that with various different languages and clients. That way you can instrument this as part of your broader offering. If you want to take it down a sort of a different path, what you can elect to do is to surface the inputs that you saw in the other tab just as a form on the web, and have a user give the users the ability to just visit that page and enter their own inputs. So as an example here, this is a completely unstylized version of the offering. If I were to come in here, let's just grab this guy's LinkedIn URL. Let's pop it in here, and let's just say I have my product offering. This is my description. So you can choose to expose just this to your user population, and this can be pasted and gated behind Notion, SharePoint, any number of other deployment scenarios. And what this results in is a very usable tool that your users can lean on without really any training. They don't have to get familiar with anything within Copy.ai. They don't need to negotiate the complexities of Salesforce or any other systems. It just becomes a single page form that allows users to start getting utility right away. Blake says, I have a table of webinar transcripts and blog posts where I'd like to build a workflow to recommend content. Can you speak to how I would get this data into the info base to pull a recommendation? The first thing I would say is that I don't necessarily know that Infobase would be the right place to do that. You may want to just create a workflow that accepts a webinar transcript and does a bunch of things to it, in which case, once you have those transcripts, you just bulk upload them to the table, and we'd run it out and have the material available to you so that you can make that determination. If you'd like to ideate on that, Blake, happy to spend a little bit of time stepping you through that offline here. I think that's really about all we have here. I think we're running out of time. Oh, sorry, we got one more question here, Shelly. Yes, Shelly, your understanding is correct. These workflows, and actually a superset of these workflows, are accessible to you. All you have to do is jump into your environment, look at the workflow library here, and look at the various names to figure out what it is you're after. And just to belabor it a little bit, right? Once you've brought something in, you don't have to keep it untouched. You can modify it to your specific need. And again, we're here to help with that. And I would encourage you to post questions in the community, because that's the best way to move the needle quickly. I appreciate we've gone more or less right to the hour here. So rather than holding you hostage, I think I'm going to let you all go. Thank you very much for attending today. Hopefully this was useful. See you over in the community. And as I said, Yash at Copy.ai, please fire over your questions. I'll be happy to help where I can. Thank you all.